Press overhead, try not to let your back arch.
I know when I first started TRX.
So maybe we cue out of that.
Previously with our overhead squat assembly. So we're looking to see at the feet, knees.
Hello, everyone. This is Marty Miller, Regional Master Instructor, and I'm here with Wendy Batts for our next installment of our Master Instructor Roundtable focused on balance training. Wendy, how you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this topic. I know that in our past weeks, we've touched on balance, but we're going to dig a little deeper and really show the importance of it and how to really get some great, results and how we can use it even as its own workout. So I know I'm excited. So Wendy, why don't we kind of kick it off? I know you put some amazing statistics together on the importance of balance training, and we'll take it off from there.
Perfect. Yes. So, let's discuss why balance training is so important. It's been shown that sensory feedback to the central nervous system is altered after ankle sprains. Of course, injuries to the ligaments of the knee and then, of course, the lower back. So the consequences of these types of dysfunctions is important to address because research has shown that approximately 80% of the U.S. adult population will experience an episode of low back pain at some point in their lives. And there is an estimated 80 to 100,000 ACL injuries and another 11 million doctor visits for foot and ankle problems occurring annually. And so therefore, muscle imbalances, joint dysfunction, pain and swelling, all of that can lead to altered balance. And another important topic on the importance of balance training is to help reduce the chances of falls. So falls among the elderly, especially those with osteoporosis, they're associated with high morbidity and mortality rates, which can involve high cost with medical intervention. So in fact, falls are responsible for approximately 90% of the growing increase of hip fractures. And there are, ready for this, Marty, the sixth, by the way, cause of death among patients aged 65 or older. So, for this reason, studies regarding the risk of falling and osteoporosis are a high priority in of course, clinical intervention. And so diminishing the incidence of falls is a health priority, of course, which reflects on both the quality of life and then the health costs. And then lastly, evidence really does suggest that exercise reduces the risk of fractures and then showing an effect on maintenance of bone mass and more importantly, improving postural stability, mobility, and therefore diminishing the risk of falls. So all the important reasons of why, us as NASM truly have a section solely for balance in all 5 phases of our OPT model.
Absolutely. And, some interesting things that, I've come across, and I know that we could have put so many more statistics on here, but, with the low back pain, I think it's 50% experience at least once a year. And then I was speaking with Dr. Clark the other day, our mentor, and, I think right now the orthopedic issues, but again, some of that would be tied into balance, is in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year spent in the medical system. So again, that's why correcting posture and movement efficiency is so important. But again, out of that hundreds of billions of dollars, some of that is due to a lack of balance, either falls and other injuries. So, this is really truly healthcare, as we really like to think about healthcare, where we're preventing instead of disease care. I like to term it, where we get sick people and then we try to keep them sick for prolonged periods of time. And, it's a whole nother topic maybe we'll cover, but, clearly it's a huge importance, as well as when you look at the impact on our society from a financial standpoint, why we are such advocates of the model. And then obviously our component that we're going to focus on today in the balance training.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, another key point is we take it for granted. I mean, we've always been able to balance, so we thought, and then it's like when you really take it, out of the equation and you really focus on just truly balance training, it really is surprising how hard it can be with ideally keeping the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, keeping everything lined up the way that it was intended to. Because just because you can stand on one foot doesn't mean that you're standing on one foot correctly. And so I think that's the big thing we really want to hone in on today, especially. Is some of those difference.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like to say to my clients or when I work with other instructors is there's a difference between training where you're looking at, well, they didn't fall, compared to proper balance training. And again, we're going to hammer that throughout this session. The key thing is we don't want that circus show where they're doing chaotic things and they quote unquote did balance, but we're looking for that precision and perfection. So we'll cover a lot of those details as we move through.
Absolutely. Well, let's actually now move into some of the benefits, of course. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking about it throughout this entire webinar. But, balance training programs are frequently used to help prevent lower extremity injuries by, of course, improving balance and the ability of many types of individuals who are healthy and physically active. And so if you look at some of the research, it's shown that performing exercises that demand balance can reduce the rate of ankle sprains, and then of course other lower extremity injuries. Man, I cannot talk today. So balance exercises are a frequent component of an integrated ACL injury prevention. And we've seen a ton of promise in reducing the rate of ACL injuries by truly just focusing solely on balance. And so, there's been several studies that have also demonstrated success with improving balance ability after healthy, physically active individuals completed just a balance training program. So, on the basis of a lot of recent reviews that's out there, if you look at the balance training program solely, that are performed just as simple as 10 minutes a day, 3 times per week, that can alone just improve both static and dynamic posture and balance ability. So it doesn't take a lot. It's just people have to put it into their regimen and really do make it a priority.
Yep, absolutely. And, we'll go through some strategies, but, my previous career before what I'm doing now currently is working at a private country club. We had a lot of that senior athletes that I like to call them, and we would just give them ideas on how to sprinkle in some balance, when they're at home, right? Just that accidental exercise that I always refer to, because they might come in the gym 2 to 3 days a week for a half hour, 45 minutes, but they could do balance training every day. So we always kind of put that in there. So great stuff. So looking forward to moving through and giving some, hopefully all of our viewers some really cool, amazing ideas to put into their programs.
Yes, it's more than just balancing on one foot. And again, I actually want to take 2 steps back and realize, or have people realize, if you are new to NASM or you haven't taken your exam and maybe you're listening to us to try to help prepare for that. When NASM is talking about balance training, we're talking about exercises that are performed on one foot. Because obviously when you're balancing on something on 2 feet, I mean, it is a balance exercise. It's not just literally, we're really focusing on, maintaining proper positioning of the foot and the arch and strengthening the muscles of the foot itself. So just keep in mind when we do go through the phases of training, everything that we're going to show you, again, is on one foot.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on. So let's actually get into the model. And so, Marty, you and I were talking about some of the fun things that we do. And again, when you're going through the textbook and you're really trying to think of like, hey, what am I doing for balance? Most people think, okay, we talk a lot about just standing on one foot and then you reach. But there's so many other components to phase 1 and the importance of what a phase 1 exercise is. And so if we look at the balance training phase 1 quote definition of what makes it stabilization, we're looking to little to no motion on that stance leg. And so, do you want to talk about why that's so important? Like what is the whole purpose of just standing on one foot?
Well, the key thing is for all of our viewers here, they're NASM certified already or going through it. You guys know that this is a progressive model. It's an integrated approach to training, and that all these components move through all the different phases. And then there's just a tweak to make sure that they fit within that particular phase. So when we look at balance, we're going to talk about it throughout the model. But the key thing here is why we have little to no motion of the stance leg, because if you start to move the leg, which you're going to see here soon, it becomes more of a strength exercise. And early on, just like we've talked about with all of our other, topics, is you got to earn the right and get the adaptations of stabilization training before you move to the other phases in a perfect world. So when we look at balance, is I shouldn't be doing an exercise on a single leg if I can't even maintain my 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, get all that neuromuscular coordination where I can keep myself in perfect alignment of my 5 kinetic chain checkpoints and either just stand there and or do something with my limbs and move an object. If I'm failing at that, how am I going to be good enough to do a single leg balance strength exercise, which we will describe what that would be here shortly. So it's just the fundamentals that you have to be able to maintain your posture and your kinetic chain checkpoints on that single leg. There are ways to make it more progressive, of course, but it'll always still be little to no motion of that stance leg.
Mm-hmm. And then as you guys can see, the acute variables, again, the acute variables is truly what makes these exercises, stand out in different phases of training. And so again, your number of exercise selection and just the balance section alone is anywhere from 1 to 4. Of course, we're doing anywhere from 1 to 3 sets, with anywhere from 6 to 10 repetitions per leg. And then it's a slow tempo. And the reason we say slow is because if you're standing on one foot, it's obviously not moving. However, if you are going to move the other leg and, different planes of motion and, you're bringing it back to the center, you want to think about really moving very slowly. So therefore you're maintaining proper alignment throughout the, the arch and of course the ankle. And if anyone needs to rest, of course, you want to give them anywhere from 0 to 90 seconds of rest. Another one thing I want to point out in this phase, oftentimes we talk about, we're really strengthening the muscles of the foot, because obviously there's so many people that, and Marty, I know that you've actually talked about this in previous webinars. And if you want to talk about it again, I think it's a very good point. But, when you're really trying to maintain proper arch alignment and you are flat foot or you pronate, when you're really trying to build up the muscles underneath it, people start to feel that burning sensation. And for some reason, people think it's okay when you're doing a chest, or a chest press, or you're doing a leg press, that you get this burn where you're like, oh my gosh, it's like so intense. That's actually a cool thing when you're working those muscles. But yet when you're working on balance and people feel that burning sensation, they freak out on the bottom of their foot. So I don't know if you want to talk about
Sure. And when we look at the muscles of the body, we're trying to train them all for the function that they have. And that's why we have, again, this progressive model. And I can tell you, I don't know the exact specifics, but there's a certain age where, especially maybe, my generation, kids played a lot more than potentially some of the kids played nowadays. But the muscles of the foot and ankle just start to become a little more dormant. And one of the things that I loved, and if our buddy Prentiss was on, he would say it too, is I love when I did my martial arts or do my martial arts training because I'm barefoot on a mat, right? So I'm even getting more neuromuscular activity to those muscles. I don't want those muscles to be dormant, just like I wouldn't want my glutes or my core stabilizers or any other important muscles that maintain postural integrity. So again, with people wearing high heel shoes, and men wear high heel elevated dress shoes or the sneakers, our feet, have become very dormant, the muscles around the foot and ankle, and that's what's connecting you to the ground. So whether you're walking, you're running, you're whatever, if those muscles are not doing their job, you're at a huge disadvantage up the kinetic chain. And, maybe in this, we'll get into a couple of those deviations that move up the chain. We've done that in some of the other webinars, but you need to have really good muscles in the foot and ankle, especially if you want to ever do running or any of these other, more advanced things. But really, I've also had the ability to train athletes, but also my country club senior athletes. The last thing you want is any of those itises, I call it, of the foot, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, or you get the Morton's neuromas. It can be debilitating, and now you become inactive, or it's harder to be active when your foot and ankle is now causing you pain. So it's probably a very overlooked area of the body to train. Mm-hmm. So yes, in our correctives, we address it specifically, but that's why I always, no matter what phase of training I'm in, I do some balance work every single day. And in my gym, I don't take my sneaker off, but in a private training studio or other things, it would be great if you could do some of your balance progressions just in a sock or on a mat, things like that, because now you're increasing the neuromuscular demand on those muscles. So, again, maybe that's where you give them their homework to do some things in a safe environment on a surface that's safe as well, where they don't have their shoe on.
Well, yeah. And looking at the statistics we just talked about, I mean, people, the elderly clients or the senior clients, if you will, I mean, look at, it's the sixth cause of death. If you have a hip fracture and falls, like it's crazy. It's super important. Plus, I mean, you have to think about, if you're standing on one foot, you're actually holding your body weight too. So, those muscles have to work, all the time when you're walking, standing, doing any of that stuff. And so, we've got to give them some love, because there really is a huge carryover to activity of daily living, as well as, like you said, to keep them out of the itises and injury long-term. So,
and clearly we're addressing the core and the hip musculature as well too, by standing in the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, but we're kind of focusing on that area that's forgotten a little bit in the foot and ankle. The good news now is more and more people are doing core stabilization and a lot of glute exercises, but let's not forget what connects us to the ground and get that foot and ankle working as well.
Absolutely. And again, core, balance, and plyo, when we talk about that, this is still a part of the warm up. And so, I mean, again, I think it's important to talk about balance training when we get into resistance as well, because again, you're on unstable surface, and, many of the exercise selections you could choose would be on one foot so there can be a lot of different ways to incorporate it, but just be creative, do fun things, keep them in all different planes of motion. And if you're short on time and you need to do more muscles, if you will, when we talk about that, doing combo exercises on one foot can knock out your balance, plus multiple muscles along the way. So therefore, if you're short on time, it's a good combo as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's actually talk about the next phase, or phases, if you will. So when we're talking about the strength phases, of course, now we're talking about phases 2, 3, and 4. And so when we're looking at, balance, strength, what you're doing in all 3 of those phases is warming up the same way. So your core will be the same, balance is going to be the same, and plyo is going to be the same. But the resistance part is what really kind of makes those a little bit different in order to hit those specific adaptations. And so when you're looking at balance strength training, again, what we're talking about now, still standing on one leg, but now you're going to add flexion and extension of the stance leg. So now, remember, phase 1, it didn't move. Anything else moved around it. Now you're actually going to be bending the knee and moving that stance leg. And then, of course, Marty, I know you're going to talk a little bit more into that, but just to go ahead and talk about the acute variables, again, 0 to 4. Some people say, why 0? The thing is I do balance, core, balance, and plyo in every phase of training. However, if you're doing an upper body day and you don't want to incorporate balance training, I mean, that decision's really up to you. But I think hopefully by the end of this webinar, you guys will start to see the importance of it all the time. And then, of course, 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 repetitions per leg. Now you're speeding it up a little bit because, again, we're adding motion to it. And the one thing is we talk about adding motion, you can also add weights to it. So a single leg squat, a lunge to balance. If you want to hold on to external weight to load it, absolutely do it. But again, don't sacrifice your form for a number. Make sure that you can maintain the integrity of the foot and ankle, as well as executing the entire exercise correctly. And then that's totally fair game. And then, of course, if you need to rest, anywhere from 0 to 60.
Yep. And, Wendy and I, when we were putting this together, we were, made a comment that that's not our favorite picture on the top. The form and technique is not ideal, but that's the one we could find that fit. So imagine that we would be there as their trainer to correct those kinetic chain checkpoint deviations that you see there on the top picture. So I just want to put that out there, because I know that we would catch that if we were watching this. So we do recognize that, and we will get better pictures, we promise. But this is so important because, again, I've always used that term, you got to earn the right. So it's great when I see people very strong on 2 legs. It's excellent. And I'm not by any means saying don't do those exercises. But when I look at functionality of human movement in sport, very few sports are you really going to only push and use force from your lower body on 2 legs all the time. Right. So I really want to get my athletes, my country club athlete, everybody's the athlete, to have some level of strength on a single leg, because whether they're climbing stairs, going downstairs, whether they're walking or whatever it is, at some point you're going to be doing those transitions on a single leg. So again, there's a lot of ways you can create really fun programming with it. Nothing wrong with, the strength-based exercises for 2 legs, but we do want to have some work on a single leg for sure.
Absolutely. And again, just think about this. If you drop a piece of paper on the floor,
Exactly.
what do you need to do? You need to bend down. You're going into a lunge probably to pick it up, and then you have to kind of push yourself back. I mean, there's a lot of carryover to exactly like everyday activities that that really does revolve around balance. And so you get what you train for. Think of the SAID principle. So we're bringing that back into every component of the model and its purpose. And again, balance strength is super, super important.
And I think there was a study out a few years back, and this is where Tony would remember this by date, is the single leg squat was by far one of the most, the highest level of glute activation in an exercise compared to a lot of the other ones. Now, it's a progression. Let's not get people there that haven't earned it. But again, even without a lot of weight, you're going to get a ton of glute activation and then all the other neuromuscular coordination and all the other fun stuff from it. So it's a great exercise to work towards. And they are one of my least favorite to do, but I do them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then too, you can also see if there's a difference in one leg versus the other. And if there is a difference, then you can see, on a strength standpoint that you may need to focus a little bit more on that side, or if there's some sort of imbalance. Again, you'll probably identify that in the assessment. However, again, remember every exercise is an assessment. So, something to think about there too.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to the power phase. So again, when we're talking about power, I say this multiple times in webinars, but the difference between a hop and a jump is 1 leg over 2. So a hop is on 1 foot, a jump is on 2. And so again, when we're talking about balance, we're talking about hopping when you're in the balance phase. And so again, when you hop, if you hop and you're explosive and you land it, but then you fall over or you don't own it or your knee caves in or your arches fall, that isn't something that technically you own. So therefore, that would be incorrect. And therefore, you need to work on your form. So that's why we say a hop to a stabilization hold. And we hold that landing for anywhere from 3 to 5 seconds. And the importance of that is to make sure that when you do move in different planes of motion and you're hopping from one leg to another, or you're staying on the same foot going in different planes. I mean, there's a lot of creativity here. Just because you can do it without falling over, it's more, can you do it, hold the landing, maintain the integrity of the arch and the foot, and then do it again. So I just wanted to point that out.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think it's important to, again, when we look at power, it's what the person can control, right? The term that I, again, repeat myself over and over is capacities versus ability. Everyone has some capacity of power. Doesn't mean their ability is going to be the same. So whether you control the speed or you control the distance that they hop, but everyone can do some level of this after a few weeks of training, hopefully. And it's so important, especially as Wendy said with that, falling, is we want people to be able to correct themselves quickly, because that's what's going to happen in real life. You miss a step, you think that you are on the last step, or someone, comes over your house and, you step on one of Wendy's son's monster trucks and, has to catch their balance quickly. I know there's a whole bunch of them planted around the house, I've heard. So, you just don't know when you're going to need that. So we have to train for it. So that way we can do it. Or if you're in athletics, you have to be able to stick that landing, change direction quickly, and keep your body in alignment so we don't end up with one of those injuries because the joints got out of place as you try to decelerate and change direction.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us back to oftentimes, with us doing this so often, and especially in many workshops, one of the common questions, and again, Marty, you're welcome to answer this, but, one of the common questions that I get was when we talk about, power phase and we're talking about balance and we say, this is really important for seniors, people freak out and they're like, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. Like, no way, because it's a higher risk of me injuring them. Yep. So, what do you usually say when you hear that?
Sure. So again, it's all on progressions and regressions. So, right. So a hop, we're using that term to indicate you're transferring your body weight from one leg to another. It's easy to assume that you'd leave the ground. But again, if we bring that down to the simplest regression, Why couldn't I just have a piece of tape on the floor? And if it's my mom, I just have her step over and then get her balance, then pick her foot up, step over. And if that's her hop for now, so be it. And then again, she may never leave the ground, but I may have her do it a little quicker, but then she has to hold the balance for 3 to 5 seconds. So I could have her go slowly. And once she masters it, I have her go a little quicker, because again, that is her power on her spectrum within that capacity for what her ability is. She never leaves the ground, so be it. But again, that doesn't mean I can't work towards that. But I would be remiss, knowing the statistics that Wendy showed, that I just ignore all of that with anybody in that senior population. But also, we need to really get it dialed in our age group, because we're going to start to lose that balance, or this is where people become less athletic, and all of a sudden one day, they're not the athlete they used to be, and now they end up, having some type of injury. So everybody needs to do it. Just work within the progressions, and whatever they can accomplish safely, that's okay. And if they hit a ceiling, that's okay. You still work within that, and you're still giving them the ability to transfer their weight and own the balance position.
Absolutely. Great points, Marty. That's what I would have said too.
That's what I thought. I read your cue cards.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And maybe I should have those, right? Get me more on point. But all right, so let's actually talk about the next slide. So when we go and we're thinking about putting it all together, there is something that you and I both discussed when we were putting this PowerPoint together, that people really, really need to think about the progressions. And, obviously starting on the floor, that's first and foremost. And if you're in tennis shoes and there's support, in your tennis shoes, obviously that's way easier than if you're standing on the floor with no support and you're, barefoot or in your socks, because again, now you have to focus without any help of the shoe. So, oftentimes we see all these fun things in the gym and they're like, this would be really cool for my client. However, remember the importance of balance training, which is, again, foot integrity, looking at the arch of the foot, maintaining, correct positioning, and again, having a mirror in front of you or your client, and so showing them, like, listen, look at this is your kneecap, and I want your kneecap to be in line with your second and third toe at all times. Because again, if they end up pronating or their foot falls, and then their knee is going to shoot in towards the big toe. If it's, they're rolling on the outside, they can start to see where that kneecap shifts. Because very often, including myself, I'm a very, very visual learner. So if you give me something to focus on, I'm really focused on my knee and my second and third toe. But remember that just because you have a dyna disc, or just because you have a Bozu ball or something like that, doesn't mean that that's what your client needs to be using at that point. And you always want to start simple and then make it more complex as they graduate to some of those tools. Mm-hmm. And so, what we have listed here, again, we're talking about going to the floor, to a balance beam, a half foam roller. And again, as you can see the picture, sometimes you're going side to side, sometimes you're going forward to back. So you're working frontal plane or sagittal plane, switch it up. As you can see, there's a picture of someone where the foam roller is turned upside down. Again, now it's not really moving. However, it is a smaller base of support like the balance beam. The AirX pad is like the spongy pillow. That's what I always call it. It's just a big square. It's a little more firm in comparison to the Bozu ball or the dyna disc. Mm-hmm. And so, oftentimes people are like, well, how is the Bozu ball like really, why do you have it more on the complex side when the bottom side of it's flat? Well, still think about it. You're standing in the center of that, and your foot can go in all three planes. You have to maintain proper alignment in order to, quote, own that exercise. So, if you can move in all three planes, but you can't maintain it, then it's really not right. So definitely want to work a client up, making sure that the choices you make are smart and that they're going to be able to build the strength that they need to truly execute that exercise.
Yeah, and we added the one in the top right just to show you that some people, again, back to what we said initially, would be like, oh, I did great. Like, okay, you stayed on the object and you didn't fall, but look at where those feet and ankle are. So that's information in, which means the body's gonna be like, oh, this is what you want me to do. And think about what's gonna happen all the way up their kinetic chain compared to the individual in the middle there who looks like, from what we can see, dialed in with their foot and ankle on the half foam roll with the flat side down, that might be the right progression that they've earned at this point. So again, both are balance exercises. One is done with perfect execution and one is done more in a sloppy manner, but both are going to make a change in the body. It's just what change are you allowing or tolerating for your client?
Exactly. So that upper right-hand picture is no bueno. Just for our viewers, I'm sure you figured that out, but that is a big no-no. I couldn't figure out how to put an X on this PowerPoint, but wanted to show the difference between someone kind of owning the positioning and then someone that is doing it incorrect. So again, super, super important when you're training and you're going and designing programs. Change it up. But we've talked about that all the time. Change it up. However, make sure it's smart.
Yep.
So. All right, so now let's actually talk about some more fun stuff here. So if we're moving on to the next slide, we're going to then talk about some different types of programming, or not programming, but different types of exercises that you and I kind of use because we want people to be creative. Like, again, it's more than just standing on one foot. So, we showed some of the fun toys that you often see in the gym that you can use to enhance the challenge, if you will. But Marty and I both were talking that we both use the speed ladder for balance as well. And, Marty, do you want to kind of talk about how you do it? And I know we're on the similar page. But.
Yeah. So basically, most of you probably know these drills, but they're done in a speed, agility, quickness, which is still great. But why couldn't we use these same drills? So there's some cognitive, they have to concentrate, but now we just add the pause in. So I can do one ins, but I give them a 3 to 5 second hold. But now I have to make sure you don't hit just like any other cues, make sure you don't hit the plastic slat. Gives them the distance to cover if they progress to this. Now the 2 ins, you could change that to where I hop with 1 foot in and then I hop to the other foot in the same box before I progress. So now it's going to take longer to get through the ladder. The 1 ins could just be 1 leg. The in, out, I could just do that on 1 leg with that hold. Now, if I'm doing an in, out, I might shrink the hold time down from 5 seconds to the 3, and I may only have 3 boxes worth. Doesn't mean I need to do the whole ladder. So again, but now you've added some patterning as programming that you already know, but now just take it from speed, agility, quickness, throw the right acute variables in, and now you can use it in your balance component. So just, again, we could go through each one of these, but I think you guys get the premise that use the patterns, slow it down, cut the ladder in a third if you need to, and just now get them to start doing things, changing directions, different objectives and goals. And now you can have fun with the speed ladder for balance as well.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about this here coming up, but like one of the ones that I do often, like in the diagonal pattern, is you kind of can do all 3, going from stabilization, strength, and power on balance just by doing that one pattern. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you have someone standing without moving, let's say on the left side, and then they do quick feet in the middle, and then they come out, they have to hold it. So it's quick feet and then hold. So that would be like your power. And then I have them go into a single leg squat touchdown. And then again, they're holding it at the top. So again, stabilization, quick feet in, hold to the other side. So you're hopping to that side, and then single leg squat touchdown. So again, creativity and really mixing things up, and again, talking about undulating and everything. You can undulate different sections of all of the stuff in the model. And that's the beauty of it. It is not, it's not rigid. You could be so creative. It's just, it needs to make sense to your client. And so have fun with it. And that's just it. Have fun with balance too. Have fun with all of it. All right, so now let's talk about some of the differences in some of our programming. So if we go to the next slide, this was one that Marty and I had fun with because we talked a lot about different programs that we've done in phase 1 and phase 2. And again, I just told you how oftentimes I can just use all 3 phases in balance just on one implement or one tool, which is the speed ladder. But Marty was like, why don't we do the total balance blast, if you will, and do different speeds, different sets. And so, again, when you do something like this, you would want someone to have completed the all five phases, and that they could maintain it. But again, having a balanced training day could look something like this. So Marty, do you want to kind of talk us through this?
Yeah, so a lot of the ways I'll do my programming is when I'm allowed to, or when the person's earned it, I should say, because I'm always allowed to create what I want to create. But when the person's earned the right to go through the different phases or the different planes of motion, again, going back to simple to complex. So I'll start with sagittal plane, then I'll move them into frontal plane, then I'll move them to transverse. So all we did with this one is, let's say this is your person who loves to be in the gym. It's their day off of their normal resistance training, and they want to go run. Well, before they run, of course, we'd have them do their correctives, or cardio or whatever they want to do. Why wouldn't I want them to do a lot of single leg to get that single leg fired up before they go do their running, right? Or however you want to do it. But just to give you an example of unique programming. So set one, we're going to just do a simple single leg balance reach sagittal, kind of keep it simple, get things moving. Then we'll go into the strength, single leg squat, and then single leg hop to hold sagittal plane, where you're going back and forth. Set one, we went from stability, strength to power. Then set two, we're going to start back again with stabilization. We're going to do single leg balance in the frontal plane. Then we're going to do a side step to hold for the strength component. And then we'll do a side hop to hold, side to side, same leg, for the frontal plane power. Then we give them maybe 30 seconds rest. We go back. Now it's transverse plane. So they've gotten everything fired up. We know. Now, again, if things aren't going well, maybe I back off and go back to the frontal plane again. But if things are moving well and they look like they're in control, we'll add the transverse plane in. So single leg balance and reach with the transverse plane. So they're getting some rotation there, with their foot. I'm sorry, I was showing my arm, but you can't see my leg. You get the concept as you're seeing there. And then the turning lunge to hold, and then a turning hop to hold. And we call it the clock. So Wendy, you use that a lot. Do you want to give some examples on like how you coach through the clock with the turning hop to hold?
Absolutely. Again, you have to think of what is the client familiar with, and most people are, unless you're just a digital person, most people are well, I know, right? Are very familiar with a clock. And so if you say, when they're facing you, okay, when you're looking at me, that's 12 o'clock, and I want you to start at 12 o'clock, and I want you, have them point to 3, point to 6, point to point. So therefore they're familiar with what direction they should be going. But at that point, then you can now add the verbal cues. And so you're showing them visually kind of where they're going, and they're facing you, and you say 12 o'clock and they're holding it. And you say, okay, now I want you to hop to 3 o'clock, and they hop to 3 o'clock and they hold that. And then you could say, hop back to 12, hop to 9, hop to 12, hop to 6, if you want to really challenge them and they can clear that distance. Again, you can be as creative and as challenging as you want. It's just, again, your client needs to be able to execute that. It's just, that's an easy way to cue someone on how to do something like that, is by giving them something that they understand. And then at that point, instead of saying, follow me, okay, I'm starting here now, I want you to hop this direction, or hop right, hop left. If you always just give them 12, 3, 12, 9, whatever it is, then, you can start. Usually I would tell people, if you're on your right leg, then hop, stay on the right leg, challenge the same leg, but again, that's more advanced. Mm-hmm. So if you need to have them, let's say, start on their right leg, and you're having them hop to, 9 o'clock, then they would hop onto 9 o'clock with their left foot. It's just, sometimes people will get all confused, and, they're having them, okay, you're saying on your right, now you're having them hop, and they have to think about now switching to 3, so it's a little backwards. So make it easy, but also make sure that they understand what you're asking them to do, and just, again, have fun with it, but, make sure that they understand your cueing and what you're asking them to do.
Awesome. I think too many people just check the box and kind of throw a little balance in and they move on. But really, if you dig into this balance, it's such an integral part of the whole model. And it really opens them up to have such better performance. If you want them to really burn a ton of calories in the power phase, if they want to run a half marathon or whatever goal, you're going to have really good balance to progress in fitness if you're going to do it appropriately, effectively, and decrease your chance of injury. So let's not kind of just zip past balance and get into the fun stuff. This is the fun stuff, and just learn how to get more out of it, and you'll see how all of a sudden you're using it more and more. And that's why we really wanted to kind of hone in and do a whole session just on balance training.
Absolutely. And again, one thing I also wanted to say, I know we've discussed this before too, but when you get into the hops and you're thinking about hopping, remember, there's a difference between hopping up onto something and then hopping down off of something. Mm-hmm. Fear usually is the hop up, meaning people are worried they're not going to clear the box. However, when they decelerate, they have a shorter landing. And then the same thing when you're having them hop down. If it's a 12-inch box, now you're asking them to kind of jump off the box. So maybe they have to decelerate 13 inches or so. And so again, that's more challenging because you have further to decelerate. And as we've talked about multiple times, decelerating in the transverse plane is where most injuries occur. Same could still happen in balance. It doesn't always have to be when you're on 2 feet. So, just make sure, again, that your progressions make sense. Just want you guys to kind of think about that too, because you can hop up on the same leg. If you're starting on right, you can hop up on right. If you're starting right, you can hop up on left. There's so many different variations that you can play around with, but always change it up as long as somebody can advance to more challenging balance exercises within that phase of training.
Absolutely. Excellent. And it looks like we have a question that has come in. So our producer, who, I'm new at the hosting and introduction. I forgot to mention our most important person here, Greg, who makes all of this look so seamless and beautiful, makes us look good. So Greg has got a question coming in for us. So question here from Linny, it looks like, what if the client has some maybe severe knee injury that hasn't healed and can't even squat on one leg, but still wants to run? Any way I can let him do balance training and let him hold on to something so he can achieve somewhat of a squat? So Wendy, you can jump at that first and then I can add on.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, you always want to think about what can the client handle with being pain-free and then also without sacrificing the form. So the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints should dictate movement. However, the client also needs to verbally say, you know what, this is when I start to feel pain. And you, as the trainer, will have to look at range of motion and are they executing that well? And if not, maybe the squat is too advanced and you want to take a few steps back and think, okay, where's the weakness? Is it, what was the injury as well? There's a lot of factors into that. Was it something like, oh, okay, they have a torn meniscus or they have a torn ACL and they're not getting repaired, so they have no ACL? Because again, all of that information is super important. And again, why the assessment is so important, because you need to ask these questions in the very beginning. Yep. But if they can't execute it the way that you need them to, and they need to hold on to something so you can work on the patterning, then absolutely. You can also do something like a ball bridge where put the ball, not ball bridge, sorry, ball squat. And again, they're limiting the range of motion, only going down where it's pain-free. So right before they hit that pain threshold. So therefore you're working on, hip extension, glute activation at the top. And that's also giving them a little range of motion with the ball, a little guide, if you will. And then you can use the same thing with the cable. That's why Marty and I love the squat to rows, because the cable will help kind of give you a little more dorsiflexion. However, it's a hard question to answer because, again, you and your client are going to have to dictate what's right. But absolutely, regress any exercise you need to, and as long as it makes sense to what their outcome is, as well as that is safe for the client.
Yep. And you did a great job answering it. So the only thing I'll add to that is, one, are they currently injured and need to be under medical care? Because remember our scope of practice. Or is it that when they get in certain motions, they experience temporary pain? Because right now I don't have a knee injury, but if I let my knee cave in and internally rotate, my foot's externally rotating, it's not going to feel good. So it's not an injury. It's just my body saying, hey, this is not right. So if we're looking at that, if we're looking at somebody who gets into a position that just does not feel good, programming will fix that. And what I mean by that is, remember, running is a version of power training. I don't care even if you're running a marathon, you're still doing a power-based repetitive exercise. So they have to earn the right to that. Just because they want to run doesn't mean they've earned the right to run. So sometimes you got to have that conversation and say, hey, okay, you don't need to go to a physician. Everything's been checked out. It's just when you start to run, that's when the knee pain comes in. That means your body's not ready for that. Let's go back to the assessment. Let's go back through corrective and or stabilization. And as Wendy said, you'll find the right progressions and exercises. But if it's causing pain, that squat, we know their glutes aren't activating. We know there's probably bad motion at the hip and the ankle. So maybe you can temporarily slow them down a little bit to have running more as a long-term goal. But everything Wendy said and going through the model is going to be the best answer to getting there to the end goal. So
Absolutely. And that's another thing too, is when they are balancing, making sure that their second and third toe in their knee is lined up, because again, maybe, some of like knee valgus or something like that's happening because of, decreased, muscle activation in the arch of the foot. So they're pronating, which is causing more medial pain on the inside of their knee. So is it because of that, because their form isn't correct? So I don't know if we answered that question. So if you have an additional follow-up question, let us know, and we'll
she'll have our email at the end as well.
Exactly.
Excellent. So it looks like we have another question coming in. So Greg's gonna send it to her. Oh, look at who, Kenny Miller. So what do you do if one leg squats better than the other? So Wendy?
Well, I thought I kind of answered this before. I mean, again, I think it really just depends on the client. Again, if you have a client that is very dominant, so for instance, I'm left-handed, so I feel more comfortable and I usually will squat or do more things on my right foot because we move in a contralateral way. We usually train in a contralateral way. So therefore, that's usually easier for me. However, that's not always the case because obviously different sports, different demands, different training, different patterning, all of that can play a part. But if you do notice that someone is more dominant on one side or stronger than one side, then, at that point, maybe you noticed, an asymmetrical shift, or you noticed, in their single leg squat or something, some deviations that you may need to work on. So therefore, is it a range of motion issue? Is it a strength issue? And at that point, you're going to actually set the programming up to clean up whatever you saw in the assessment. But it's okay to do more corrective exercise on that one side in order to kind of even out the differences. But, and then incorporate more on two legs or whatever when you're getting more into resistance if needed. So Ken, if I didn't answer that correctly, then please feel free to let me know.
Awesome stuff. We have another question Greg's going to send our way. Okay, how do you describe or cue the arch? So I'll start, and then Wendy, I'd love to hear yours as well because we have different patternings or cueing. Sure. So first, I always try to get their, make sure their foot is straight, just like when I set them up in the overhead squat the first time. Make sure their foot is straight ahead with their hips and their knee, and the second, third toes in line. And then what I say is, and I show, sometimes I'll even take my shoe off and I'll show how I can create the arch. And I always say I want your toes on the ground. I want your heel to always stay on the ground. And what I want you to do is just raise your arch slightly as if I was going to slide a thumbtack underneath your arch, giving them that visualization of, okay, don't let my arch come down. And a lot of times what I'll always say is if they put their hands on their glutes and squeeze their glutes, they'll see how that actually helps control that arch as well. So if I'm tying in how the core is so important to that as well. So that's the visualization I give. Wendy, do you have any other cueing for something like that?
No, I don't use a tack. I usually use a grape. Because again, you can say don't make the wine or don't let the grape roll out. However, whatever. Yeah. Again, it just kind of depends on the client and the type of rapport you have. However, yes. The big thing is if you tell someone to, like Marty said, the foot needs to maintain staying on the ground. And oftentimes what I mean by that is if you tell someone that you want them to kind of shift more on the outside of their foot, then they roll their foot up and they bring their heel and big toe off of the ground. And that's definitely not what you want. So I usually tell people to dig their big toe into the ground as much as they can. And then at that point, slightly shift their weight over. But that's really when the cue and the visual of kneecap and second, third toe comes into play. Because if they do that, they can actually see themselves kind of move over. And then they see that, wow, that was lined up. And then that's usually when they start to feel that burning sensation on the bottom of their foot. And so again, when they say that, like, oh my gosh, I feel my arch, or like, that's fantastic. That's exactly what we're hoping for. So, so I don't know if that helps. And if you need me to go a little bit deeper, but usually dig the big toe in, slightly turn kind of shift the weight a little bit, knee and toe in line with each other, and don't squish the grape.
Great. We have one more question.
Sure.
Greg's going to send us. All right, from Jorge. So when looking at the programming template, there is the balance section, but also the strength training section. You can have someone train legs with balance. Do we have to use both sections of the template? When do you want to give that one a crack?
Yeah. So when he says strength training, are we talking in the resistance? So we're in strength phases 2, 3, and 4, or are we looking at phase 1 and then, the resistance portion of phase one, because it's kind of two different things. I personally, I do core, balance, and reactive the way that it was intended to, exactly how we have it kind of defined, because again, I'm preparing the body for the resistance section later. So I would say that if you're in phase one and you are really going to focus on a lot of different things, then on balance, maybe rather than doing a single leg balance with reach, and they've been coming to you, so this isn't maybe their first week, you could then focus on the arch alignment and have them do a bicep curl to overhead press. So they're getting the gun show as well as the shoulders all in the balance section of that portion of the template. And then when they get down to the resistance in phase one, you still want to make sure that the exercises are uncontrolled. They're an unstable but yet controlled environment. So when they get to legs, then you could have them do a single leg squat, or you could have them do a lunge to balance. There's always some different types of single leg to hold, or just, maintaining proper alignment. So you can add those types of movements. However, when you're in phases like the strength phases, so 2, 3, and 4, again, now it's going to change a little bit when you're getting into the resistance portion. So I would definitely say do, your single leg squats or your single leg Romanian deadlifts, or, things like that actually goes into flexion and extension of that stance leg. Because when they get into, the superset, or they're getting into, muscular development or hypertrophy type training, and then max power or max strength, you want to make sure that everything's firing the way that it was intended to fire. Everything's lined up as ideal as possible. So therefore, when you execute it, you have prepared the body the way that it should be prepared in order to execute the resistance portion correctly. I hope that makes sense.
Perfect. Make total sense. Yep. So, in stabilization, you have a little more flexibility in a sense of where you put it in. And then the strength phase, in phase 2, it's already built in potentially how you're going to do your superset. And then, like you said, let's get everybody warmed up and ready to go when you start using those heavier weights. So awesome. Excellent. So I know we're actually running out of time here. It's amazing how you can talk for an hour just on balance training. We covered a lot, but there's still so much more. And that's why we're so passionate about the OPT model. So Wendy, if you want to give your information and any, as Prentiss always says, key takeaways.
Yeah, I think the key takeaways is don't forget balance. Balance is super important. It's very critical in everyday activities. We do it every single day. So again, you get what you train for. So you want to actually incorporate balance into your programming. Again, follow the model. The model has been researched. It's evidence-based. There's a process and a systematic progression to the madness. So just if you follow it, then you're going to get the results you're looking for. And to contact me, you can email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org, or you can find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13.
Excellent. And then again, I agree 100%. Just dive a little deeper into balance training and make it maybe highlight it a little more if you haven't been, and try to be creative with it. Like we gave some examples, and I think you'll find, the immediate impact it will have on your clients' results for each and every client you train. And then again, you now know, due to the statistics, how it's so important. And that's why it's, in that part of the program, got to get everyone balanced before you jump into the more complicated stuff. So, and then hit me up at marty.miller@nasm.org. And then Instagram is dr.martymiller72. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. We hope always that we added some value to your everyday training, and that you're going to look at balance training a little differently. So we look forward to seeing you on another roundtable here in the coming week. So all the best to each and every one of you, and have a great day. Thank you for attending.
Thanks,